let's forget about those picture-perfect homes for a second, shall we? How about real homes? Dealing with stuff that's already there, figuring out the best layout for the space, that's what we're exploring today. A few weeks ago, I asked you to send me your home decor challenges so I could give you my somewhat professional opinion. So this is another episode of What Would Maria Do? Alright folks, so this is the 4th episode of the series, and since these videos are super fun to make and to watch, according to you, my goal is to bring you at least one episode of the series per month. So if you like this kind of content, consider subscribing to the channel if you're not already. For today's video, I've selected 3 very real rooms, and they're all combos of integrated dining and living spaces. So let's get straight into the first one. This is Finna's main living space. This is the home of a young couple and their dog, and it's way bigger than their previous apartment. So they're having trouble figuring out the layout and making the room feel inviting without investing too much into new pieces just to fill up some space. There is a dining table in here, but since there's another one in the kitchen, this one is mostly used when they have friends over. Alright, so let's start with the layout first. After drawing it, something became very clear. Can you guess what? Yes. Notice how most of the furniture is concentrated on this side of the room, leaving this other one looking almost empty. Having both sofas, a dining set, and both chairs all close together makes the room feel unbalanced. So I actually think we can improve that without major purchases by just adjusting the layout. Okay. So the idea here is to create a clear living room zone and a clear dining room zone. I like the symmetry of having the 2 chairs in this little nook, so I'll keep them here and I'll place one of the side tables already in the space right here between them. Additionally, I would move the record player to this spot here as well. Okay, so this already looks more like a living room layout to me, but I would actually bring the 2 sofas close together and leave a gap behind them so it all feels more intimate and not too far apart. And since this room is pretty wide, the path of travel is still very clear. Okay, so behind the sofa here, I would add a floor lamp for some dimension, and since we have the wall shelves on the other wall, I would just complement it by hanging a plant from the ceiling. This would also help create visual interest vertically, which is very important in a room with such tall ceilings like this one. Finally, to complete this living space, here's one thing that I would actually replace: the rugs. We have quite a few rugs in here, and this definitely contributes for the room to feel too segmented, you know? So I would suggest replacing those for one large rug to frame the living room. I mean, you could also get a much larger rug to cover the chair's nook as well, but rugs are pretty expensive. So, in my opinion, one like this should be enough. Alright, now onto the other side of the room. First, I will keep both the piano and the desk where they are. But here's another suggestion. I would actually replace this large cabinet for something else. It looks very heavy visually, and it kind of feels out of place in terms of style, in my opinion. So, in its place, I would add something like a buffet here to complement the dining area. These here are 2 pieces of the IKEA Besta, for example, which I think would be a good and affordable option for this space. And of course, the table will go right here. Now, in the original pictures, this corner is occupied by what seems to be the dog's shelter or something like that. And of course, if this is the only spot in the house where we could go, that's absolutely fine. But if you could move it somewhere else, I think we could put a nice floor lamp in here to bring more light to this corner of the room and also create more interest. So that's what I'm gonna do here, okay? Alright, so this is the new proposed layout, with both sides of the room with well-defined functions and more balance overall. Now let's talk about looks. In my opinion, the style of the room is pretty well defined, so I won't be changing that. We have a lot of wood, which is great, many sources of light, meaningful personal objects. The room looks lived in, and this is a good thing. Okay, so let's start by bringing the sofas closer, moving the table, and creating the nook with the 2 chairs. Perfect. Now let's replace this rug. I actually think the colors used here in this room make sense with each other, so I'll just add a rug that has some of these colors. So I chose this one here, which has a more traditional feel to it, with a beautiful pattern and touches of blue and this muted tone of red. And let me go ahead and add those colors to the green sofa as well, with a couple of cushions, so it all feels connected. All right, next let's talk window coverings, because these huge windows here deserve to be framed. And in this case, where we have a section of the room with so many windows so close together, I actually think a ceiling track with floor-to-ceiling curtains is a great alternative here. So instead of having 3 curtain rods close together, we have one seamless solution. And this still frames the window in a very sophisticated way. Now, I would say that getting such long curtains will not be cheap, as they will most likely have to be custom made. So one solution is getting a few IKEA curtains and doing something like this to make them longer. Still an investment, but definitely much more affordable than custom-made ones. I would also get the ceiling track from IKEA, by the way. Cool, now on to some final touches. Let's replace this red pendant here, as the color looks way too vivid for the space. I chose this paper lantern one, also from IKEA, because I love it so much. I think it's perfect and it's super affordable. Next, the floor lamp here behind the sofa, and on the opposite side, the plant hanging from the ceiling. You can barely see it from this perspective, but it's here. I would also take advantage of the large windows and add a tall plant here in this corner. Plants make all the difference, don't they? Okay, and as a final detail, I would paint this ceiling beam here to bring some contrast to the upper part of the room. And that's it. Now onto the other side. Okay, so let's start by bringing the table and chairs. Then let's add the Besta cabinets that replaced the previous wardrobe. Now, I could hang another picture here on this wall, but instead, I would actually choose a beautiful tapestry to complement the style of the room and fill up this huge empty wall. Finally, let's add a floor lamp here in the corner, and I chose this black one with clean lines to bring in some contrast in terms of style. Alright, and before we move on to the next room, here's a quick before and after of this space. I absolutely loved it. What did you think? This is Esther's house, and this room is where the family spends most of their time, watching TV, eating, hosting. She's thinking about upgrading the sofa and wants to have more seating options without making the space feel cramped. With 2 young kids and a dog, she's overwhelmed by choice, and therefore the room looks unfinished. So let's get straight into the layout, shall we? Okay, so this is a small space and it has to be split into dining and living with enough space for the whole family. So the first thing that I'm going to do here is gain a few extra centimeters by moving the dining table closer to the wall. And for that, we will need to replace 2 of the chairs for a bench. So let's do that. I love the solution for compact spaces. It often allows for significant gains in functionality. So by doing that, now we can actually fit the sofa like this. So it faces the TV, which is ideal. Now, even though we're replacing the sofa, I would actually choose one that has similar dimensions to the one that's currently there, because it actually looks proportional to the size of the room. Cool, now we could move the chair to this side here. Now, with such a compact space like this one, I think it would be too much if we added yet another chair. So my solution here would be getting a pair of ottomans. They can serve as extra seating when guests come over, but in the day-to-day, they can be used as side tables and footrests. Besides, by getting ones with built-in storage, they gain yet another functionality, which is just perfect. And I would also include a side table here because it's always a good piece to have next to a chair. Alright, so in her submission, Esther mentions that she's not sure about getting a rug for the space because it can be hard to keep clean, and I completely get that. At the end of the day, the choice is yours, but I just cannot skip having a rug in a living room. It just makes all the difference, both in looks and in coziness. So I will go ahead and add a round rug to this living room here, okay? Okay, so that's it for the layout. Now let's make it pretty. I'll start by removing the sofa and the chair and moving the table closer to the wall like so. Then let's bring in the new sofa. I chose this one from IKEA in brown because, let's be honest, 2 kids and a dog. A white or a beige sofa just would be impractical here. Next, the chair. You could absolutely keep the current chair, but I suggested a replacement just because this one is more compact and it also connects better to the overall style of the room, especially the dining set that you already have. This is the Akena set from IKEA, by the way. Let's go ahead and add the side table. It could be as simple as a stool. Then the ottomans. I chose these rattan ones, also from IKEA, because they're great. Nice texture, warm color, huge storage inside, flat surface to serve as a table, a great multifunctional piece. And finally, the rug. We have so many neutral colors in the room already, so I decided to add some color here with a green rug. And this darker color would also be easier to maintain, because similar to the sofa, a lighter rug would not be practical here. Oh, and make sure to choose a low pile one, so it's way easier to clean. Just vacuum it and you're good. Now for some final touches. Starting with the curtains. These ones are way too stretched and short, so I would replace those for something like this. You can always choose something with pattern, like the ones that are there currently, but make sure they go all the way to the floor and the panels have enough fabric to look nice even when closed. To bring personality, I would add a framed photograph or a piece of art here between these windows, and to give it more charm and dimension, it would be hung from the ceiling, so it looks to be floating in front of the curtains. I just love this solution. Let's also add interest to the ceiling by hanging a gorgeous light pendant in the center of the space. And this is the same room from another perspective. Let me just make a couple of suggestions for the dining area. One large piece of abstract art with tones of red and green, and a super stylish light pendant fixed on the wall, which is great because you can just plug it into a wall outlet and you're good to go. And it also looks amazing. And that's it. Here's how the room looked before, and here's the after. On to the final one. This is Marta's apartment. This is the home of a couple and their 2-year-old kid. And this integrated space is where the whole family spends most of their time. Cooking, eating, playing, working. They would love to have a cohesive space, Japandi inspired, with green accents, but don't know where to start. Okay, so let's take a look at the current layout. With such a multifunctional space like this, I think they laid out the zones pretty well. So we have a workspace here, living here, and dining over here. So this makes sense to me, but I do think it can be improved. And I don't see a TV in here, so I'll just not include one as well, okay? Alright, so with this layout, I'm thinking the sofa kind of crops the space. So my goal is to shift the orientation of the living room like this, so it feels more integrated. So to do that, I would suggest getting a slightly smaller desk and add a tall but narrow bookshelf right next to it, so this stuff here can actually have a proper place to be stored. Then we can keep the easel here, which can remain closed when not in use, and the kids' swing can also stay. Also, how fun is that? Okay, so now that we have the sofa aligned with the wall, we can add one extra chair to the living room, like that. A side table and also a coffee table. And of course, a rug to frame it all and define the zone. Now, I usually try to somehow separate the zones in an integrated space. So in this one, for example, I'm not a huge fan of the desk being so close to the sofa. So I would actually suggest something like a room divider here. And it would serve both as a functional piece and as a stylish piece as well. As for the dining area, not much to change here, honestly. The table looks proportional to the size of the room, so that's pretty much it in terms of layout. Now let's talk about style. Starting with the workstation, When it's part of such an important room of the house, like this one for instance, I think it's a good idea to invest a little bit more to get higher quality pieces to make sure they are part of the design and not just an afterthought. So I would suggest getting a beautiful wooden desk in this walnut finish, which matches with the open shelves that will go here, right next to it. And I'm choosing a darker tone of wood because the rest of the space is very light, including the kitchen. So I just think it would be a good idea to have more contrast in this little corner. A nice looking office chair would complete this corner of the room. Now for the living room, let's bring back the sofa, and I chose to keep it because, let's be honest, sofas are pretty expensive. And I think we can work around this one. Okay, and I would also add the extra chair here, and I chose this pretty one that's almost sculptural to inject some interest through shape. Next, I would actually choose a large ottoman instead of a proper coffee table here, just because it can act not just as a coffee table, but as a footrest, as an extra storage solution, extra seating, just like in the previous example. And in small spaces, multifunctional pieces are key. For the side table, I chose a minimalist yet interesting black one with some texture. Okay, now on to some finishing touches. Since Marta has mentioned she'd love to have some green accents, I chose a green rug for the living room. And I also added more texture to the sofa with a few cushions and a throw blanket. Now, to segment the zones, let's add this Japanese-inspired room divider in this lighter tone of wood. I would recommend getting something with a see-through fabric or paper, just so you don't lose that much natural light when working. I love this solution, I think it looks so good. But as an alternative, you can also go for wooden slat room dividers. I think it would also look amazing here. As for the wall behind the sofa, I see that you have quite a few pieces here, but I would suggest moving them to another spot in the home if possible, as they don't quite match with the style that we're aiming for here. This larger one can actually go here on this wall, but let me go ahead and replace these other ones for one single meaningful family picture with a wooden frame. And it will be, in turn, framed by this beautiful arc lamp. And since the arc lamp has such a powerful presence, I don't think we need a pendant light in the ceiling here in this living room. Alright, now let's look at the dining nook. First, I would look for chairs that match the wood tone of the table for that minimalist and sleek look. And green cushion seats will actually tie the dining space with the living space. Tip: if you can't find chairs that look exactly like this, one option is to have them refinished and or reupholstered. Okay, now let's swap this light pendant that has absolutely nothing to do with the rest of the room with something like this, sleek and sculptural. If this option gets too expensive, the IKEA paper lantern that you saw in the first example will also look amazing here. I just wanted to include some variety. Finally, instead of an artwork, I would actually use this wall to store a couple of folding chairs that guests can use when they come visit. And I chose these dark wooden ones to connect with the dark wood of the office space. And that's it! Just a few key changes in this one. By the way, I think a projector would be such a good alternative for this layout. You could hang the screen right here and roll it up and down instead of having a fixed TV setup. Okay, so finally, here's how the room looked before, and here's the after. Much more cohesive and inspiring. Okay, so in every one of my room transformation videos, there's always people in the comments asking me which software I use to create these visualizations. And as you all know, my first step is to look at the layout of the space and play around with the possibilities. And to do that, I use Rayon Design, which is the sponsor of today's video. Rayon Design is a new next-generation software for interior architecture and design, and I have been truly loving it. The interface is sleek and clutter-free, and you don't need a powerful computer or complicated installation. It runs right in your browser, so you can work from pretty much anywhere. It's also super intuitive to use. I mean, just look how easy it is to draw and edit walls, for example. With Rayon Design, I can quickly draw and edit floor plans and layouts, either starting from scratch or using one of their many templates. Then it's just drag and drop. With over 4,000 elevations and top view blocks in the library, it's easy to test different layouts and make them look amazing. This is great for both professionals doing more complex work, like feasibility studies or detailed millwork, and interior design enthusiasts who just want to improve their own homes. And here's another great feature. You can share projects and even invite teammates to collaborate in real time on the same canvas. Plus, you can import and export multiple file formats. It's honestly great. So if you'd like to try it out, just click the link in the description. It's free. And thank you Rayon Design for sponsoring this video. Alright folks, so what did you think about all these transformations? Let me know in the comments. And if you'd like to submit your space and have a chance to be featured here on the channel, I'll leave the link to the forum here in the description. If you like this video and haven't watched the previous episodes, here's one. But before you do that, don't forget to leave a like and consider subscribing to the channel to see more content like this. As always, thank you so much for watching and I'll see you next time.